COVID, kids stay in their classrooms. This has to be done. This is in year one. We need appropriate heat in that room. It would put a unit ventilator in there. And that's why, for me, heat is a priority. It's just not, that's not acceptable for me. We would not do anything with the old unit that's in the 12 by 12 crawl space. It would just stay. They would, you know, however you want to say that, they would abandon it. And they would put a new system in and abandon the old one. The district priorities are not new either. You know that these have been in here. The building consultants for the building committee. If the building committee wants to do anything exploratory and they need consultants, they need the money. I did just notice on this document that I'm showing you that the reimbursement rate shows 54.64. It's actually 55.36. So that's an error on this document. It's the same thing on item 2 and 3. It is correct on the spreadsheet. So again, the building committee consultants are the people to look at, you know, engineers, architects, things like that, if they wanted to kind of identify any action for land or building projects. The items 2 and 3 there, one is land for a new school, and the 750, that would be part of the $750,000 would eventually be part of the 45 if you built a new school on a new site. If you did a new school on a current site, which is not the recommendation of the board, you know, the 750 disappears if you do it on a current site. That's my list of projects. Unfortunately, I have a few more since I submitted. I just wanted to share real quick. You already know about the parking lot plan. I shared that with you. Stu emailed me the other day. We've had some issues with our bus radios and dead spots in town. And this is something that, you know, Stu and I talked briefly about. If the emergency, you know, Stu, and I'm not sure if you're putting this under a fire department thing, we would like to consider putting portable radios just like Public Works is using that are working fantastic in town, no dead spots, into our buses, and then putting one of those radios into each of our schools so we can communicate with our buses. Right now, sometimes when our buses are in dead spots, another bus has to relay to get to that bus. We can't always get that bus, and that's safety-wise, it's not great. So Stu and I talked. We're going to get those and test them out. But if there is something that we could add on to into a CIP request, that would be one. I have not even had a chance to share that with the board yet. Yeah. The second item that came up was, I know that Erica has, I think, shared CIP already. She shared the alarm piece, that the alarm monitoring. If that doesn't happen out of CIP, I need to add that to my budget. So if there any discussion on that is really important for us, because that has to happen on the front side, and because it ends at the end of this year. The last item that's not on is we're eligible for some money right now through our E-rate grant for certain things and wireless access points in our buildings. They're old. They need to be replaced at some point. And we are in the process of getting a quote for them through the E-rate, and E-rate is reimbursable. So it's like, you know, I think we have up to $60,000 right now. We're waiting for the quotes to come in. It just happens to be the E-rate time. We only had one vendor come out. I don't know if more than that will bid on the project, but it's one of those, just like a grant reimbursement, we believe, where it's like, hey, if the project were 100,000, you can, you get 60% reimbursement. We have $60,000. You would get the $100,000 project for $40,000 of town money. So I don't know if you want me to come back with those. I wanted to pass those along just because they're days old, and we just found out we had some more money there that we didn't know was going to be extended.
What was that third one for, Phil?
Was it the wireless access points?
Wireless access, okay.
Yeah, so that's what goes in every classroom. So the students can use their Chromebooks to the wireless access points. We're also paying a license on each of these wireless access points every year. but they're original. When they were placed into the building, they're original. So it's just something at some point you replace your wireless access points, and this is how that money could be spent. So the money can only be used for certain items.
Phil, quick question.
Yes.
Going back to the comment you made about the monitoring for the alarms. I realize that changing the alarm receiving center is going to require a contract with someone and maybe some programming, certainly. Why would we be talking about that in capital? It doesn't seem like it's a capital expense, or maybe I'm missing a piece of the conversation.
So, and Erica could speak to this, but there's, you have to install new panels. And so we thought with the install of new panels and new equipment that it may make sense. It's one of those things that, again, this is one of those weird CIP things that, you know, the caveat of if it lasts 5 years or longer, you could put it in as long, if it's mechanical or, you know, even though it could be under $10,000. We just thought this was the place. Erica, you could chime in. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
So the companies we spoke with, Mike, the panels that we have, and there are multiples across the buildings in town, are proprietary, and some of them are obsolete. And so for a company to come in and do our monitoring, they are recommending replacing the panels in order for them to be able to have access to them. And they had been upfront with us in the beginning that, you know, they would have to be able to gain access to those panels. And as you can imagine, one company doesn't necessarily want to do that for another. Didn't seem to be an issue when TN was doing our monitoring, but that's not an option anymore. And
yeah, so that's actually not technologically an issue. That's a sales issue for these companies. I have very extensive experience working with all these systems in my other job. And we have every kind of system you can imagine, every different age. Almost all of them are compatible. But it would certainly take a little bit of coordinating to make that work. But I don't see us being in a situation where the cost of the work would be a capital thing. It would be so small, or should be so small. So
Mike, what I presented last week and what you missed in last week's presentation was, I believe it was 14, I'd have to look in here, just over 14,000 across the board. It was between 2,000 and 3,000 per site. So the numbers were small, but when we put them together and put it as a capital project.
So you're talking about putting it as a one project.
Correct.
Okay,
for the town. And then the monitoring, that cost, each individual site would put it into their operating budget. But the new panels we bundled together.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Like it looked like in that proposal, Mike, they were adding cellular communicators to the existing panels. So basically, instead of dialing out over the leaf lines, they're doing the cell thing.
Yeah, that's the salesman's, definitely, that's their solution of choice for sure.
Yeah, Mike, and you know, obviously you have expertise in that area. That's the one thing I think we always try to avoid this. And we've been stuck on a few things that we walk into when you get a proprietary panel, and you can only call one company, and I'm not going to say the name of the company that I'm thinking of right now that we've had to use in the past. They charge an arm and a leg, and no one else can do that because it's their panel.
Yes, I am very familiar with all of those one companies, and I've had to fight with them all in the past. I know that well. And
it's frustrating. So if we can avoid that. But
it is breakable too. It is breakable. They just will never tell people.
Yeah. Okay. That's the reason the Delta panel for us is not proprietary. The panel we had prior to the Delta panel was, and I'm talking about a different system, obviously, but this is why a Delta panel is good, because it's not proprietary and you can attach several different things to it. But you, again, I trust your expertise on that. It's your job.
Yeah, I'm definitely, as this conversation continues on, we can try to make sure we get the best bang for the taxpayer dollar.
Agreed.
I can just speak on that.
I'm sorry, Stu.
If I could just speak on that radio project a little bit. For those that weren't around, about 2 years ago, Public Works was looking for a better radio solution because they could not talk from one side of town to the other. They'd have to count on trucks in the middle to relay from point A to point B to point C. And at that time, the state of Connecticut opened up their radio system for use for municipalities, which means the state maintains all the infrastructure, the repeaters, the towers, all that sort of stuff. And to get into the system, we needed to buy either a handheld radio or what's called a mobile radio, which plugs into your vehicle. And they've been using that for, I think, almost a year now, with great results. And, you know, Wellington's got some big hills in the middle. You can't talk from Hall School up and over the hill to the other side. It doesn't work. So it's a big plus to be able to get into the state system. The other overarching goal is we'd all be in the same band at that point, and like Wellington would have their own channels, so to speak. So in the case of some emergencies where, you know, either, you know, we needed to talk to the bus directly or the bus to the school, or there's a medical issue, so on and so on, we'd all be on the same radios to be able to talk together. The fire departments are getting a few as budget allows, and it'll be an ongoing project with them. But finally, we could all talk together. If the bus got stuck, you could just call Public Works on the radio if they're out plowing and say, hey, you know, we're here. We've occasionally called the Public Works if we're going out to an ambulance call and it's snowing like crazy. We'll ask the truck that's got that area on his route to basically plow us away into the thing. So being able to talk between town agencies would be a first, and it's certainly a goal, but also, you know, reliable communications from the school to the buses. You're down at Hall School and you're trying to talk, you know, to Potter School Road because some parent isn't there to pick up their kid or something. I could see why that operationally could be a problem.
Yeah. There's a lot of perks to that project for sure. And again, I'll submit those. I haven't even had a chance to run that by the board. I didn't know that was an option, so I will share that with you as soon as I have that information.
Alrighty. Anything else for the Board of Ed submittals? Going once, going twice. Eric, if I could ask you, what's going on with STEEP this coming year?
You mean the reallocated funds?
No, the new and updated STEEP, which I think was limited to the 128,000.
Right. So we were approved. We're just waiting for the contract from this one is with DEEP.
What about for next year?
We haven't heard anything about STEEP upcoming.
Okay. If STEEP did become available, what if any of these projects could be funded through there?
The school, nothing on the school side.
Okay. Well, I'm talking all the projects.
No schools, no vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
No school. I'm sure we could find something. I would, you know, hope that maybe one of our road projects to get it, again, if they're at that large amount that they have been in the past. We haven't been given any guidance as to whether or not they're STEEP. No one is willing to say, so we'll see.
Okay.
I don't have much hope. I mean, the STEEP that came around with this time was geared specifically towards things that would make operations more functional with COVID-19. Those were priority projects, and you can see they limited that dollar amount. So we'll see what comes out of the current session. Can I mention before we get too much farther, I'm not sure what happened with the recording, but this meeting didn't start getting recorded till 7:49 when I noticed after starting in the beginning that it was not recording. So Catherine, were you?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't respond to your chat because it said it was disabled.
Okay.
I have all the notes. I don't have a
recording.
Yeah. But
the first time that's happened to me. So, you know, we will post what we have. With the caveat that, you know, I'm not sure. Sometimes technology fails us. So hopefully it won't happen again.
Phil, any comments on the timeline of the school committee or school building committee and what's going on with that?
Yeah, so we have our first meeting, the 26th, Erica?
Yeah, Tuesday the 26th.
Tuesday the 26th is the first meeting. You know, there's not a lot of business that night. It's just really appointing some positions. And the really only, I would say, a piece of business that night that is on the moving forward side is just to review what were the recommendations from the Fryer study, not to get deep into the Fryer study, but what were the recommendations that came out of it? What were those options? And so we'll review that with the committee, and review the charge and kind of the purpose of that committee, and how to move forward. So Erica, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, it's a lot of housekeeping. There needs to be a chair appointed, reviewing the charge. And then, like Phil said, we're kind of reviewing how did we get here, right? How did we get to this point? And then we'll talk about, as a committee, what the next steps will be, so we can begin to gather information that they want and be able to put it together so that that committee could determine the direction they were going with.
One of the things that could be added to your CIP spreadsheet there, you talked about the cost without the new school stuff in it, but the other would be subtracting all the projects that wouldn't apply if the new school went through. And my rough math, there's probably $1.7 million of school stuff that perhaps wouldn't need to be done if a new school was built.
I think it depends on what year you're in too, right?
So, yeah. And that's why I
right.
really asked about the timeline of this, that, I know it's going to take a long time. It always does. But the sooner you could, make a decision and move forward and get the, support needed behind it and the appropriate votes and all that, could mean that, we wouldn't need a canopy at Hall School or, things like that.
I agree.
And, then that's kind of I won't say holding it up. We obviously have responsibilities to maintain the properties we have. But if there is a movement forward to go a different direction, that, backs off a lot of the things we have to do with some of these buildings.
Yeah. And, I think the board is really trying to take the direction of, if there are items that, next year when we submit CIP, if there's forward movement in this towards some option and it doesn't make sense to do a project, they're not going to put that in year 1 or year 2. They're going to put it 3 or out. I think I don't want to make that decision. I sort of made the decision with the roofs to hold a little bit too, is because there was movement. But the Board of Finance also said, look, we want to do the roofs either way. Even if we lose some of that funding, the reimbursement, we believe that we should be doing this. So, I think that it's an important conversation, but I think it's larger than just me. I think the board should weigh in on that. But I also think that, the Board of Finance should weigh in on that, and the CIP group should weigh in on that. And again, it depends on the year, just like Erica said, because it's interesting. Certain people have higher priority items than others. And we just need to understand what is health and safety and what is nice. So.
And, making that investment is, important, but if it's going to be a school you're going to leave behind in 4 years, do you put all new wireless access points in now if you're going away? The problem is nobody knows.
Yeah.
I think by the time you know about the school project or whether or not it'll be a school that they're leaving behind, then you'll know, hopefully there'll be some idea of what the town would want to do with it. And so it may shift some of those projects just into a different lane.
Yeah.
Instead of a Board of Ed lane. I mean, not all of them, like you said, some would go away, but some may still need to be done. Any of those heating projects, we probably don't need clocks and buzzers and those
Correct.
things. Maybe.
And some of those items can be moved. I mean, you wouldn't want to move older items to a new school or a renovated school, but you can move a wireless access point, and we've talked about that with Novus, as that would be something that could be done. You wouldn't move all the wiring and the ceilings, but the actual
you could do the devices. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Anything
Sorry about
else?
all the projects, and thanks for listening.
Yeah. Any other discussion tonight? What went on? believe the next meeting is on January 20th, which is
Next Wednesday.
the Parks and Rec and Fire Departments. So I'll entertain a motion for adjournment unless anybody else has anything else.
So
You-
moved.
oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
No, I take that back. Go ahead, Steph.
No, I just wondered about the senior center. How we'll get them in if, did they not know? Or
They got the same communication that they typically get. They may not have any new projects for this year, and especially since they haven't been, actively in that building. And if you recall, the last two things they had, were the vehicle and the painting, and they didn't really have much more. So if they were to bring us something like conservation did, we would fit them into the schedule for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So now I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nobody ever opposes. We'll see you next week.
Have a good night, all.
Don't take it personally, Stu.
Yeah, there you go.
Erica, real quick.